Hello everyone, and welcome to the presentation of the 2021 to 2025 five-year financial plan for the town of Princeton. My name is James Graham. I am the Director of Finance for the municipality, and today I'll be guiding you through the bylaw and through the line items that make up that bylaw, and hopefully give you a little bit more information on how we compile a budget and answer some common questions that have been answered on social media and brought to the attention of town staff. Our agenda today, we'll explain a little bit about how the public consultation process works. We'll go through the bylaw, various schedules and how that gets constructed. We'll go through our expenses, how we design a budget, some of the assumptions that are made within that budget, and review sort of the detail and some of the numbers are derived. And then revenues. So what are our revenues? What sources do they come from? And how are those numbers developed? So the public consultation process, the community charter states that we have to go through a public consultation process. It does not state what that public consultation process should be. Traditionally in the municipality, we have presented a mailer and mailed them out to individual residents. We've had open council meetings in the past, reviewing the budget line by line, item by item. It takes quite a while. Some years we do, some years we don't. Every year we always open the budget obviously up to public consultation as we're required, and this year will be no exception. With COVID, the chances of us getting together and meeting are relatively small. Our original plans were to meet with the regional district, Riverside, and their director of finance for the regional district would go over the Area H budget, and I would review the town budget, and we would take questions in a joint session. However, COVID being the way it is, we have not really had the opportunity to do that this year. So this presentation will be our descriptor. This will be our chance to sort of go over the budget in fairly solid detail. And if there are any questions, any comments, anything that we need to review, please feel free. It is your right to be consulted, and obviously welcome to submit questions or comments. There are 3 ways of doing so: via email to myself, James Graham, finance@princeton.ca. You can write the comments down on a piece of paper and drop them off at Town Hall. Town Hall is currently closed due to restrictions behind the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we do have a drop slot in the front door. They will be held and presented to council before third reading is adopted. By phone call and used for questions only, just because if I can answer a question easily, that's fantastic, but it's very difficult to transcribe what gets described over a phone call back into written form for council's consideration. So we would ask that if you have something that needs to go in front of council, a political question, why is this in the budget, why is this not in the budget? I don't think we should be spending so much money on the arena. I think we should be spending more money on infrastructure projects. I don't think we should be spending more money on office photocopiers or red pens or whatever you think. That needs to be written down and submitted as an item of public consultation, please. We set an arbitrary limit of January 31st. Order to council for deliberation of third reading. We hope to have the financial plan adopted in February. We have until May 14th. That's written in the community charter. So we do have the luxury of time. If there are very strong convictions against any sort of thing, council is definitely at their leisure to put the brakes on adoption and have further discussions on certain items for adjustment before we pass it. But May 14th is our drop dead deadline for submission to the province. So without further ado, I am going to move into the bylaw. There it is. So here is the 5-year financial plan bylaw. This is what the bylaw that actually gets passed by council. The first page is largely administrative. It describes that the financial plan is considered schedules A through E of this document. Gives the financial plan or the bylaw number 995. It repeals previous year's financial plans. Every year we pass a new financial plan as required by the province. So this year is a 2021 through 2025 financial plans. It covers 5 fiscal years, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. 2021 is the most detailed listing that we have. 2022 to 2025 are considered conceptual in nature, and you'll see that come up as we review the bylaw. The reason being is that we really want to get 2021 as close as possible to being able to be administered on a day-to-day basis. Anything kind of beyond that, 2022 is a great example. It's an election year. Things could radically change with the new council after 2022 and in the last couple of months of 2022. So really the 5-year financial plan, when we go beyond year 1, it's to allocate potential multi-year capital plans. It's to give some sort of semblance as to what operational requirements are going to look like in several years. But it obviously will change. It changes every year. And in the financial plan in 2022, we'll review the numbers that we made up this year and adjust accordingly. So the bylaw consists of a couple of sections that are required by the community charter to be put into the bylaw. This is one of them. Council is required by law to set a tax rate policy. It's written down. It was last passed in 2019 as part of the budget process. So last year, I beg your pardon, 2 years ago, because that would be the 2019 fiscal year. We're going into the 2021 fiscal year. So please have a read through it. It contains council's methodology for property taxation and how we wish to adjust property tax rates through the various classes. So there's different property tax policies, methodologies that go toward residential versus commercial properties versus industrial activity versus utility rates and such. So please have a look through. If you have any questions about the tax rate policy, please feel free to ask. More than happy to answer if necessary. Okay, so Schedule B is our meat and potatoes. That is our consolidated financial plan. That's where our numbers come from. It is a consolidated financial plan because it's based on department. So every department has a line item on this budget. Beneath that department, there are other line items. We will review those in the budget presentation coming up after we review the bylaw. So for example, the capital expenses have several capital projects underneath them. These are detailed in Schedule C of this bylaw, and we'll review that momentarily. But the other ones don't necessarily have another attachment within the bylaw, and we will review the presentation accordingly. Revenues are based on sources of funds, so we receive grants and registered contributions and municipal taxation, and all these are based on categories. So that's that. We will also review those in the presentation document. A couple of the future dated notes, because this is really the only section that dwells on anything past 2021. We notice that the provincial grants are planning on increasing substantially. That's based on the approval of our grant for a new indoor aquatic facility in Princeton coming up. We hope to hear an announcement this year. Also known as proceeds from borrowing. Right now, 2022 to 2025, pending approval with the next financial plan. There's some plans on the table to possibly renew our infrastructure. So, like I said, 2023 to 2025 is conceptual in nature. So, the concept is there to improve infrastructure through borrowing, but again, much more discussion to be had. And when we talk about borrowing, there is a large amount of public input that gets put into that. In fact, if it's anything long-term, it has to go to a referendum. So please don't think that fund is written in stone or anything like that. It is a concept and will be discussed in great detail in the future. Obviously, if there are any questions on this, please feel free to forward them. Changes in reserve funds, I will review that in Schedule D of this bylaw. The net ones are located in Schedule B so that we can achieve balance at the bottom. You'll see the difference is always zero. Municipal governments are required to have balanced budgets by legislation in the community charter. So that's essentially how we balance out our budget. Planned sources of revenue and planned distribution of municipal taxation, again, required by the community charter. The sources of revenue are listed as such. Those numbers will change slightly when we get third reading if council changes the budget document. Those are planned numbers. If we don't get a couple of government grants, if our sales are up or down, obviously those numbers can change. But at this point, that is our planned amount. Distribution of municipal taxation, that final number will be based on 2021 BC assessment numbers, which come out at the beginning of January. So just a quick note on the BC assessment process. So you will receive your assessment notices at the beginning of January. If there are any appeals to be had, those need to be filed in January. After January, those get adjudicated and we receive our final numbers in March. The tax notices are based on numbers that get sent out in March. So if you have any questions on the appeal process or that, you'll need to contact the BC Assessment Authority. The phone number is online at bcassessment.ca, or please call Town Hall and we can get you in touch with those. Schedule C, capital expenditures and sources of funds. So this section is new this year within the bylaw. It essentially will break down each individual capital plan into sources of funds, into a maximum amount of expenditure, and what the object is for that capital spend. The note at the top essentially says that Schedule B is what the budget is. These items are deemed supplemental to that single budget line item. So every so often we'll have something that goes slightly above budget in a capital item, and other items may finish slightly below. So if possible, and that's a big key to this, because some items are funded by conditional grants or things that need to be directed toward that specific project, and if it doesn't get applied to that, then the funding disappears. But if it's something that we can take one capital item and apply it to another, then we will do so. Obviously, if the entire category goes above budget, we are required by the community charter to amend this bylaw, and that comes with its own period of public consultation. It also lists that capital projects for the period 2022 to 2025 are conceptual in nature. So we have a couple of capital plans, a couple ideas that may come up in future years. This schedule primarily deals with capital items that are starting or continuing within 2021. So this will not affect anything 2022 to 2025. That'll come in the Schedule C for future years. So without further ado, we'll quickly review the items that we have. The first item is OCP and DCC review. So we have not updated our official community plan since the late 2000s. It is more than 10 years old. It is due for an update. So that is in the budget to be reviewed for this year. And we also have a in that same category to bring in a bylaw to implement development cost charges within the town of Princeton. Town of Princeton has never had development cost charges. It is something that's fairly ubiquitous among the development community in other municipalities, and the province really wants us to adopt one. So we are looking at putting one in. The source of funding is current year taxation. Since current year taxation is a relatively stable form of funding, we consider this project to be funded and can begin as soon as the fiscal year commences. Fire department equipment. So the exhaust system at the volunteer fire department building was bought used, and it is beyond its expiry date. So the fire department has requested a new one. The source of funding, again, shifts a little bit. 2/3 is current year taxation. 1/3 is the shared services grant from the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen. So when we talk about the shared services grant, there are various programs that are offered in Princeton that the Regional District contributes to the benefit of Area H residents. The fire department has a expanded boundary around the town of Princeton where we respond to areas outside the town, and the Regional District contributes to our budget to offset those costs. It includes capital items, so at this point we would request through their budget process that the exhaust system for the fire department gets funded. If that grant is approved, then we would consider this project funded. So we have to wait until their budget is approved before we move forward with anything like that. So that's largely how the source of funding works when we talk about individual capital items. If the regional district should not approve this project for whatever reason they see fit, this project would be considered not funded and would either go back to council for reallocation of the funds. If we wanted to fund it 100% with ours, that would be council's discretion, or the project would be dropped until 2022. Just because something's in the budget doesn't necessarily mean that the money will be spent in the current fiscal year. Fire hall roof replacement. So very similar. The roof is beyond its prime at the fire hall. We propose to replace it. Again, 1/3 contributed from the regional district, and 2/3 of the funding would be funded by taxation. Downtown beautification. So consists of 3 separate objects in one project. So it would be to install a new facade for the visitor center, to install a new public events sign outside of the visitor center. The current one is often glitchy and fails, and we need a new one. Many people have pointed this out to us that the public event sign has some difficulty sometimes outside the visitor center. And to install a fountain outside the welcome sign at Highway 3 and Vermilion Avenue. So in front of our new sign at the where the Vermilion Avenue crosses the highway, where the flags are, that's where that fountain would go. The facade, obviously, it matches our gateways and promotes our image to local tourists, and that's why that is in there. The source of funding, so the $230,000 from land sales reserve from the Princeton Industrial Park, historically that's how we funded the gateways and the bronze statue projects. That would be for the first 2 bullet points, so the visitor center facade and the public event sign outside the visitor center. When we sell land as a municipality, with very few exceptions, the community charter tells us where the money can be spent. So the first thing that gets paid out is the cost base of that land. So any land improvements or upgrades to that property need to be paid off first and taken out of the land base. Anything over and above that gets placed into what's called the Land Sales Reserve. And the Land Sales Reserve by Community Charter can be spent by council on land, improvements, or other objects of a capital nature. So it is proposed in this budget that that Land Sales Reserve would be used for other items of a capital nature, improving the improvements or upgrading the visitor center, and a new public event sign are obviously capital objects. So that would be what where the funding would be used for that. Also, when it comes to the Land Sales Reserve, the project cannot really continue until the funding is secured. So until there are agreements in place to actually transfer the funds, that project, those two parts of it, cannot continue. Federal provincial COVID-19 economic recovery grant, that's largely the fountain at Highway 3 and Vermilion Avenue. Again, it's in the budget, but remains unfunded until a decision is made on that federal provincial COVID-19 economic recovery grant. They're looking for shovel-ready projects. That it's a shovel-ready project, so we're hopeful that that gets approved. Campground capital improvements. So we propose to spend that funds on new washroom facilities, new building facilities at the campground, along with some upgrades to the plumbing systems, and the campground has gone several years without capital upgrades and needs some work to it. And again, the federal provincial COVID-19 economic recovery grant gives us the ability to upgrade those projects. No current year taxation applied to that project. And until that's approved, that project remains unfunded. New vehicles and public works equipment. So Public Works proposes to purchase a skid steer for the Public Works Department. The source of funding is a capital asset reserve. So the capital asset reserve has sufficient funds for that project. So upon approval of the financial plan, the capital asset reserve can be drawn on for purchase of that equipment. Paving program. So the object is to pave various town roads as determined by the Infrastructure and Parks Director. The Infrastructure and Parks Director actually just retired on November 30th, so probably to be perfectly okay for the task, we should probably update that to the infrastructure technologist and the supervisor of public works. Those would be the two gentlemen in charge of updating the paving program. The paving program typically comes out in the spring, just once all the ice and snow melt. We can see what the condition of the roads are in the spring and set a solid paving program accordingly. Again, public input is paramount in this. If you have any questions, if you think certain roads should be paved over others, the Public Works Department is the people to go through our infrastructure technologist here at Town Hall. The source of funding is federal gas tax funding through the Union of BC Municipalities, or UBCM, and that doesn't get paid out until sometime in the year, usually toward the end of the year. It's more of a August, September type of funding. So again, so long as the funding is secure and we know it's secure, we've received letters from the UBCM promising this amount of funding, then that project can proceed. Street signage replacement. So it is year 3 of a 3-year project to replace the street signs in Princeton with a standardized sign. That's the blue sign you see in town as opposed to the white signs, which are various different designs. This is the 3rd year. It gets funded with taxation every year, and we may have to extend that if we haven't quite got all the signs in town replaced. Slope stability study. So this is to do a geotechnical assessment of the various hillsides that lay above town roads within the town of Princeton. It's currently in process. That's more money allocated to the slope stability. This will probably be a multi-year program just to make sure that we don't have slides on various municipal roads and to keep the public safe. This is a current year taxation funding as well. Lighting. The grant to install airport lights, to funding largely is a grant from the province of British Columbia. The rest of it will be funded with operational funds from the municipality. Is right. Princeton Health and Wellness Center. That $1 million. We have to be able to pay for that by the time the facility is completed. This is pending an infrastructure grant from the federal and provincial governments. So, we're hopeful. We hope to hear something. If the grant is approved, then we will move forward with it. Second bench Hillside Trail. So that is often, I think, known as zigzag stairs, but the one at the end of Fenchurch that goes up to the third bench is in a state of disrepair and is currently closed due to safety concerns. We have a plan to rebuild it, and that will be funded out of current year taxation. And the concession roof at Memorial Park is failing. That will be replaced. The cost sharing agreement with the RDOS picks up, that should read 43%, not 33. Calls for 43, and the rest is current year taxation. So again, any questions on any capital plans that that are misunderstood or unclear, or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask questions or put submissions forward to council if you think those numbers should be changed. Schedule D is proposed reserve transfers. So every year there's various funds that go in and out of reserves, mostly as part of the capital plan, sometimes as part of the operational plan, depending on if we always should collect enough money from things like water and sewer to fund operations. If there is money left over, it gets put back into reserve for future years. And then money is drawn from reserves for to pay for various things that come up through the year and as part of the capital plan. So that's where it sits right now. We propose to draw a net amount of $738,000 out of reserves. Again, this is planned. Often the budget is overestimated. For example, snow clearing. We always overestimate the amount of snow clearing that's necessary. We always overestimate wages for the Public Works Department. So that way there's, if we require an inordinate amount of overtime for snow clearing, if we get, if we have a really nasty winter, the overtime rates increase incredibly if we have a Public Works issue, such as snow clearing or snow clearing is a big one. But yeah, there's often extra amounts put in the budget. So when we talk about proposed reserve transfers, often these are much less than is what is required. So 738 this year, or next year. This year, I believe right now we are operating to review. I think we're at about $1.2 million we're putting into reserves. So it really varies back and forth based on what comes through for the year. Again, Permissive tax exemption policy is something that we're required to have in our financial plan. It has not changed. I have the date, October 7th, 2019, so it was revised last year, was the last time. Please feel free to read it. If you have any questions or comments on our permissive tax exemption policy, you can feel free to ask. Permissive tax exemptions are granted to various charitable nonprofit organizations in the municipality, community-oriented, and essentially if they own a building, they are exempted from paying municipal property tax. Certain things are statutorily exempt from municipal property tax. Municipally owned buildings, crown land that's still occupied by the crown, places of worship, parks, all required to be exempt from property tax. But the municipality has certainly a way to be able to exempt organizations. So that's the actual bylaw itself. I will get into the presentation on the budget and go over where we derived our numbers from and how we design it. We put online on the site. So about if there's something that remains unclear here, please look at the bylaw. That will probably clear up some of the things. I tried not to copy verbatim the bylaw into this presentation. So budgets are made up of both capital and operational items. Operational items tend to be less than 1 year in duration, or tend to be what accountants call immaterial to the capital budget number. So essentially means underneath a certain threshold. You know, we could capitalize everything that lasts more than 1 year, but you know, if we buy a 50-cent pen or something like that, we're not necessarily going to capitalize it. It becomes a lot of work for not a lot of benefit. So capital budget tends to be multi-year. It tends to be assets that will stick around for a while, buildings, engineered works, water and sewer infrastructure, vehicles, anything that's going to be lasting more than 1 year. And they tend to be bigger ticket items. So north of $5,000 is really when the radar starts going up, that it's going to be part of the capital budget instead of the operational budget. When we make a budget, if there's a specific item that's operational in nature, but we really want to highlight it, or it's a large ticket operational item, then it will often get put into the capital budget and adjusted at the end of the year. The best example I can give you of this, when we reviewed it in the bylaw, was the OCP-DCC upgrade. It's not necessarily a capital item. It's hard to capitalize by law. But it's proposed to spend up to $100,000, so it's in the capital budget, but will get shifted into the operational budget at the end of the year. The budget also gets categorized into separate departments. We reviewed that in the last bylaw, so into public works, into economic development, into leisure services, or water or sewer, for ease of financial management by staff. Our management staff is divided into departments like that. So economic development, public works, leisure, water, sewer, they're divided that way. So the budget needs to be divided that way so managers can easily figure out what they have in their budgets. Capital departmental budgets are categorized by project with all costs expensed and adjusted into the asset base for the capital asset policy of the municipality. So we make up the budget and it will get allocated back into the capital base. So when we talk about potential surplus money at the end of the year, or money that gets put into reserves for future year, they will get transferred forth at the end of the year. A portion of that will come from the fact that capital assets are not necessarily considered expenses. They are capitalized over. Operational departments are categorized to fit the operational needs of the department. So, so labor is categorized by department and not necessarily to the function. Functions are reserved for materials, subcontractors, and transfers. You'll see that as we go through. But largely the labor possible just for ease of allocating subcontractors is left separate. If we need to hire a subcontractor for a project, it's nice to know what that budget looks like. And then if we need to supplement the use of that project with labor at the end of it, we can do so. That gets carried forward. As we determine these capital projects, and as I said, we throw everything on the table during a strategic planning session. Then we narrow it down during the budget discussions to certain projects that are figured out. I don't think I actually explained how the strategic planning sessions work for the municipality. So. How the budget gets constructed. So the operational budget largely is set with a couple of multipliers. The budget will go up 2%, the budget will go up 3%, the budget will go up 5% based on historical averages, what's called for in collective agreements, largely what we've experienced from local subcontractors in the past. Multiplier will be added. And then that's largely how the operational budget is set. And it's largely set in the summer. So 2021 was set in the summer of 2020 moving forward. With adjustments made throughout the year if necessary. The capital plan, unless it's been approved in 2020, in which if the project isn't considered complete, will automatically get put into the strategic planning session. But any new capital items that want to be debated also get added onto the strategic planning session through the corporate department. So if there's something in essence, if you have a capital idea, if you think we should build something in the municipality, whether it be a road or infrastructure or what have you, the corporate department is the best place to start with that. Our director or our manager of corporate services is Carrie Casa, and she'd be happy to record ideas for you moving forward. So these ideas are built together and brought to the strategic planning session, held 2 days, usually in either early September or early October. We don't like to interfere too much with the Union of BC Municipalities annual general meeting, which is held in the third week of September. So right after Labor Day or right before Thanksgiving tend to be when we do our strategic planning. After that strategic planning session, finance will take the strategic planning, we will cost it, and then we will put it into an overall budget for presentation to council. In previous years, council has debated it in an open special meeting of council. Obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to do things a little bit differently and do it in a strategic planning session this year. Public meetings were just kind of impractical behind that. So in that meeting, that's where council basically took the list of projects and shortened it down to the list we have today in the bylaw. After those budgetary meetings are made, we balance the budget, we make sure that things are make sense. Council's brought up to date on what we spend money on and what we plan on spending money on in the future. Finance takes that input back, creates the bylaw, and creates this presentation. Council will pass the first and second reading of the bylaw, and then we present the budget to you in the format that we can. So this is the format we've chosen for this year. Again, hopefully the pandemic is short-lived. Hopefully the vaccine comes on board, and for the 2021 season we can have that public meeting with in conjunction with the regional district to go over the budget numbers for 2022. However, that does not in any way, shape, or form remove the ability of the public to comment on the budget. Again, if you have any comment, they are always welcome through the public consultation process that we went through at the beginning of the presentation. So I digress. Let's head back into this. So again, this is largely kind of some rehashes of what we already talked about. So the tax rate policy is in Schedule A. The capital plan budget in Schedule C. 2022 and beyond will be detailed in future plan years. Capital projects are only performed if the sources of funds are available. So it's not necessarily based on if the money is sitting there or raring to go. It is based on security. So if we receive an agreement to fund something, then we will then we can move forward with it. That's how the approval process works. Okay, so so now we're getting into the nitty-gritty and the numbers. So the operational budget in general supports a 3% increase in labor, material, and subcontractors. So we take a look at historic numbers. So 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017. Often, if we get more than 5 years back, it tends to diminish the reliability of the numbers. But if we notice that there are certain categories that would require some extra funding, that often will occur as part of the operational budget process. There's always some things that spike that are what are called systematic errors as opposed to random errors. Random errors, and in statistics, a random error is something where the costs will increase by a certain known amount because we know what we can roughly predict in the future, inflation and such. But a systematic change would be something that a new contractor came on board, or a new methodology, or a new line item that we don't have history for, that we need to kind of sit down and make a projection for. You kind of need to throw out that 3% and really think about where the numbers are derived from. And there are a couple of accounts in here that had systematic changes, and I think I caught them all as I went through the line items. And the explanations will be in this section. Random known 3% increases and fluctuations in costs based on annual needs are not recorded in this presentation. So yeah, so the third point I highlighted. So we 3% isn't necessarily caused by just labor costs. 3% is a materials and subcontractors number. So often there's been a request, why 5%? Other municipalities are doing less. Other municipalities are doing this or that. And Princeton decided on 5%. Why 5%? Well, the municipality is largely hiring contractors and procuring materials and it's a little bit. Okay, so we're going to go over expenses by department. We have several departments. That was in Schedule B. So we'll go over this. This will be the general format of how we go over things. So it'll be expenses and expenses. So it'll list the sources of funds. It'll list a description of the line items that are in that budget and what the pie chart means. And then if there are any of those systematic changes, we'll make sure we try and get to as many of those as we can. Again, if I missed one and need an explanation, please let me know. So this is an interesting slide. So funding is spent on those 5 departments. Fixing the streets, making sure people have a place to live and play, making sure that in that. So used for debate on real estate commissions and any other subcontractors that may provide guidance or counsel to council. Changes between this year's budget and last year's budget. So these are systematic changes. There was a slight reduction in the labor costs of administration. We restructured management after the retirement of the Director of Infrastructure and Parks. And that's the labor costs actually decrease a little bit as a systematic change. So again, those are the systematic changes I was talking about earlier in the presentation. For grants and aid and for our new facade improvement project. So the grant and aid funds nonprofits that provide services to the municipality. We fund things such as the Fall Fair, the rodeo, the traditional music festival. In the past, we have supported through the grant and aid program the Junior B hockey team. We've supported the Arts Council through these, various nonprofits, the swim club, sporting. If you think your organization is applicable for grant and aid, the deadline is January 31st. Please feel free to apply to the grant and aid program for potential funding. The facade improvement project. So essentially, that is grant to assist in improving the facades of the businesses on Bridge Street. The owner of the building would use part of the funding, and it will be supplemented through this program, and that's how that would work. If you have any more questions on the facade improvement project, please contact Town Hall. We'll put you in touch with someone who can get you better details. It is it's a pilot project. Council's approved it for 1 year, and its aim is to improve the facades again on Bridge Street. And that's obviously a systematic change because it's a new project for this year. Protective services. So this covers our fire department. It also covers extraneous bylaw. Bylaw is usually the staffing costs are more of an administration charge, but protective services is well, it's not quite self-funded. It tends to be a little bit more supplemented by fees. So we're talking building inspections, bylaw infractions can be in on this. So there are, and there's also a cost sharing element when we talk about fire department, because the regional district contributes 1/3 of that for the fire protection area outside of town boundaries. There are no systematic changes in this budget, so we will move on. Emergency program. So this covers our emergency program. This covers our emergency social services program, our Fire Smart program, anything that would deal with Princeton in an emergency, wildfire, flood, earthquake, any other kind of natural disasters is what we fund this program through. It is funded through municipal taxation. This year we're receiving a substantial amount of money from the Fire Smart program. The province is putting in quite a bit of money to try and mitigate effects of wildfires. Obviously, we've noticed that wildfires are getting worse as the years go by, and the province is contributing money to try and mitigate some of the effects of that. So the line items are there. There's not a lot of systematic changes. The Fire Smart program is kind of expanded. The emergency program is slightly expanded through the use of grant funding. So those are included in those as a potential change. BC Transit, so pretty self-explanatory. The transit service that operates within Princeton and on certain days operates throughout the entire South Okanagan all the way to Penticton. Municipal taxation kind of supplements this program, but the sales of transit fares and passes and grant funding is provided by the Regional District, the Village of Karamias, and the Interior Health Authority as contributing partners. Economic development. So largely economic development is funded through municipal taxation. Capital funding is done through industrial park land sales and that federal provincial COVID-19 recovery funding, as we discussed back in Schedule D of the bylaw. Sorry, Schedule C of the bylaw. The line items. So external promotion and tourism, we often get that question, what's the difference? External promotion is often used to try and promote businesses to move to Princeton. Tourism is to promote the tourism industry. So people who aren't necessarily going to start business here, but will stop here to have lunch, take pictures, explore our area, and hopefully have return business. Gary Schatz, our Economic Development Officer, has some fantastic stats on the value of tourism to the municipality, and I would encourage anyone who has questions about the value of a tourism strategy or external promotion to speak with him. The conferences budget was a systematic reduction. We find it highly unlikely that there will be any conferences in 2021, but if there are any, they'll be significantly reduced toward the end of the year. So that was systematically reduced by 15,000 this year. Visitor Information Center. So the Visitor Information Center is largely funded by municipal taxation. Again, we do receive a grant of $18,000 from the provincial government through the Destination BC program to operate our visitor center. And there are some sales of goods. Obviously, we do have various tourism items for sale in the visitor center, and those do help supplement our expenses. We did add an additional staff member in 2020 to expand our hours of our visitor center. That's the only systematic change we've really had within the visitor center. Public Works. So Public Works is our largest operational budget. It is almost always our largest capital item. A municipality largely revolves around Public Works. It's a large part of what we do. A large part of the operational budget is done through municipal taxation. There are certain Public Works aspects that may be billable projects that may be done through sales of service, but a large portion of the operational budget is strictly municipal taxation. Capital budget through reserves, taxation, and gas tax funding. Princeton largely tries not to do a large part of its capital budget with municipal taxation, just so it doesn't end up swamping local taxpayers. As I said before, there may be a discussion on potential borrowing sources in the future for infrastructure projects, but that is very much in the conceptual stage. So we'll leave that be for now. The capital has various sources that are funded by all sorts of different funds that we went through when we discussed Schedule C. We're doing a flood mitigation study with the Village of Karamias and the Regional District. I don't think that was in Schedule C because I don't think we've determined the expenditures so far into 2021, so that will be presented to council when we have a little bit more of a strong conceptual. So again, the financial plan does change through the year. New projects will come up that sometimes can't be debated right at the beginning of the year. So if a new idea does come up with a source of funding that is palatable with council, staff members, theoretically members of the public, or councillors can bring them forward for discussion, and council can choose to adopt them within the financial plan if necessary. The line items, all fairly self-explanatory. Public Works operates on labor separate, so the labor is put in as a line item, and then the requisite functions underneath are largely for materials or subcontractors. That's a definition of all the different categories. I will not read them. They are very, very long, but the budget itself is divided into those separate categories. That is a pie chart of the budgeted percentages that are based in that pie chart. The actual budget document was put in the minutes during the first reading. If you need a copy of it, please let me know. Airport. So the airport, the maintenance is largely through municipal taxation. Sales of service for fuel sold does make a small profit. Does not necessarily cover all the expenses of the airport. This year, this budget is dwarfed by the capital spend because we're doing the airport lighting project, which is largely grant funded. So it looks like quite a bit is taken up by the capital, and it is, but again, a large part of that is grant funded, not funded by taxpayers of the municipality. Parks program. So sources of funds are municipal taxation. We receive a very small amount in park user fees for renting of ball diamonds and such, but there's not a ton of money that comes from sales of services. Most of parks is funded by municipal taxation. Waste management. So waste management, very interesting category. When we first started here, a large part of waste management was being funded by municipal taxation and a cost-sharing agreement with the regional district. Over the course of the last couple of years, this category is being funded more and more and more by sales of service. So the landfill is becoming much more self-sufficient. It is essentially collecting enough revenue so that the municipal taxation is not supplementing waste management, and we're hoping that quite quickly that the landfill will essentially pay for itself with fees, and the taxpayers won't be required to subsidize anyone who comes to the landfill. The line items are fairly self-explanatory. We did get a new contractor, so the costs of the waste management have increased in general. The previous contractor had done it for a number of years and was probably slightly below market rate. When we sent the contract out to RFP, we received very, very few responses, and the responses that we did receive were very excessive, more than double what the original contract was. Even the proponent we ended up taking was still substantially more than the previous contractor. So we were kind of due for a correction in expenses for waste management, and now we're having to pay those in a full year. The landfill closure accrual. So based on what the landfill closure accrual is, it's based on future amounts to close a landfill, based on estimates conducted by engineering firms, and then we use an annuity calculation to figure out future cost of closure of that landfill. So when we get to that point, the liability for closing the landfill over the course of the amount of time it takes for the landfill to be completely dormant is taken into consideration. So because of the nature of the accrual, when interest rates dropped, it actually increased substantially that cost to last year, and that should calm down interest rates have essentially dropped as far as they're going to, and when interest rates increase, that will reverse itself in future years. Cemetery. So the cemetery is largely paid, the maintenance is largely paid by municipal taxation. For the other categories, it is paid for by sales of service. So people who buy plots and are finally laid to rest in our cemetery, those are largely paid for by that sale of that service. Recreation leisure services. So beyond public works, this is our second largest category of expenditures. The source of funds, it's done through municipal taxation, but there is also a cost sharing agreement through the regional district at 43%. The capital budget, again, a large part of the capital project as projected is the aquatic center. If we're hoping again that gets paid for, that the grant gets approved, and we can begin construction shortly. Line items, again, capital we went over with in Schedule C, but it lists all the different line items we have for leisure services. Leisure services we largely divide up between the pool, the arena, Riverside Center, and recreational programs through the Recreation Department. Couple of other items to note here because they've changed in the last couple of years. You'll notice that there's an annual grant for the operation of the junior B hockey team. That used to be a grant and aid. It was moved into a recurring line item for recreation. And the museum and archives, again, was paid for with a grant and aid. The grant and aid was decided to be strictly for nonprofit and community organizations. If it was a recurring and substantial expenditure, we wanted to make sure that those organizations got an actual line item. Again, operational changes, systematic changes. Even after the pool is constructed, the pool costs obviously increase substantially to account for the fact that instead of operating a facility that's open for roughly 4 months of the year, we are paying for a facility that's open 12 months of the year. So that would be something that we would have to account for in future years. Again, conceptual in nature, and we'll have better details as we move closer to that date. A pie chart that kind of reflects, again, spending as required. Water service. So sources of funds shift. In Princeton, we bill annually for our water. That is changing in 2021. The plan is any commercial and industrial users will be metered, and any residential users will continue to pay the annual rate. Kind of takes away some of the more arbitrary points of our current fees and charges bylaw when it comes to water and sewer usage. So there are the categories. It's fairly self-explanatory. It's done by function. So water testing, permits, training, capital. Administrative support, you'll see that in all categories. The administrative portions of Town Hall are costed out to the various departments. That would include things like legal, advertising, insurance. They are detailed in the general government category. The GIS system. Trying to think of other ones. I can list them off, but yeah, those are all included in the administrative support. Those are billed out to the separate departments. Management fees. So management is put into administration and then sent out to the various departments. For example, the Economic Development Director is a general government function, but his salary is removed and applied to economic development. Sewer, again, a large part of this is capital and dependent on grants, but the rest of the operational is done by function, lift stations, training, systems maintenance, engineering services, permits. It's all fairly self-explanatory. So those are the expenses. Again, if you have any specific questions on anything, this is a pretty broad overview, I understand. So if you have any questions or you want to go over anything in a little bit more depth, please feel free to ask questions. If you propose changes, again, we ask that be in writing, but simple questions can be usually answered in a day or two. We move on to the revenue section. So these are the proposed sources of revenue for the 2021 budget. It's important to note that that grants from other levels of government cover a large portion of the capital and somewhat the operational budgets. So if these grants disappeared from other governments to maintain services, there you'd be looking at a tax increase of about 108%. Very excessive. I think it's interesting, and I think it needs to be put in there just to acknowledge how much of our budget does rely on other levels of government, the province, the federal government, the regional district. Municipal property taxes cover the lion's share of the operational budget, but they don't cover all of it and very little of the capital budget. So I think it's important to illustrate that when it comes to the budget, we try and maximize our grants as much as possible, and try to maintain tax dollars as much as possible. Okay, so we dive into municipal taxation, and by far this is often the most contentious portion of our revenue section. The budget was done with the methodology of a tax increase of 5%, and we've already explained sort of where that methodology comes from. A rough 3% in the operational department increases, with that extra 2% to offset possible increases of subcontractor or materials expenses that may exceed 3%. So unfortunately, Princeton is not doesn't have a large excess of reserves. So if you read if you read the details of other municipalities, oftentimes what ends up happening is there's a little bit more to the story behind the reduction of a tax increase. So you're seeing tax increases of 1%, 2%, 0%, 5%. Vancouver's about 5%. So there's a methodology behind that. But if you usually read a little bit more, you'll notice that they draw from reserves. They'll draw from a fund. They'll draw from they'll put their capital spending on hold. They'll put their operational spending on hold. They'll plan to do less with less money. Princeton, we decided not to, as staff, we decided not to present it to council with a lot of reductions and a lot of cuts. And I'll sort of explain why with this chart. Princeton, let me explain the third point first. So the 5% tax increase is based on total tax revenues of the municipality. So it doesn't necessarily apply to each individual tax bill. I just don't go to every single solitary tax bill and multiply it by 105%. It's based on total tax revenues of the municipality. So when we have that 5%, I calculate we had about a $2.5 million collection last year. A 5% increase it to about 2.625 million. So it collects about $125,000 of revenue, or about 25 grand per percentage increase. It's all based on assessment. So if your assessment goes up considerably past the average, you might end up paying more than 5%. If your increase is significantly behind the average of the municipality, you'll be paying much less than 5%. And this chart gives a great illustration of that. The mill rate, which is basically the multiplier I use to calculate municipal property tax, is the far left column. The average value is the second to last column on the right. So average values have steadily been increasing in Princeton over the last 10 years with certain exceptions. And that's why when you take a look at the cost of the average house, it took a little retreat between 2013 and 2014 because of property values actually dropping within Princeton, but over the course of the last several years, that number has been steadily increasing, which was built into a 5% tax increase. If your house does not change value, if it remained at $200,000 for the last 10 years, every year since 2017, which was $702.38 in a $200,000 house, each year after that, the tax bill has actually dropped. And the way that works is with a 5% increase, if the value of property in Princeton exceeds that 5%, and the value of the house doesn't change, the tax value will actually decrease because the assessment for the entire municipality increases faster than the tax increase does. And this is also expected in 2021. Property values initially out of the BC Assessment Authority are due to go up 11%. With a 5% tax increase, that means the average mill rate or the average tax on a $200,000 house should in 2021 again decrease. I won't know specific numbers until those 2021 assessment numbers come out in detail in January, but there's a pretty good chance that this chart will continue in the same pattern it has since 2017. Also, it's interesting to note that if you take a look at the budget increases by more than 5%. This is due to what's called non-market change. And non-market change is when the tax base is increased by something that's caused other than market pressures. So if you sell your house at more money than you paid for it, that's a market change. If somebody brings a new house into existence, one that didn't exist in 2019, that's not caused by the market, that's caused by the construction industry. So that house would be naturally increasing in value more because of construction. And there are other reasons that it's not strictly listed as new construction. There's zoning changes, there's changes in use of property, there's systematic errors in the assessment that would get adjusted through a non-market change. If you want more details on non-market change, I would suggest you contact the BC Assessment Authority. They would know more than I would on this subject. However, I'm sorry, 13% it says there. Yeah, the projected value of residential class in town is projected to go up 13% in 2021. So what I'm trying to get at, because of the nature of how municipal taxes are calculated, if you have a problem with the value of your municipal tax bill, the first person I would probably get in touch with is the BC Assessment Authority and take a very, very good look at your assessment when it comes through in January. If that percentage is excessive, and like I said, there's 13% there, so expect that number to go up at least 13%. If it goes up significantly more than 13%, I would be calling the Assessment Authority and asking them why. So fair warning, just make sure you're well educated on to where these numbers come from. When it comes to doing taxes, the municipality is largely limited to taking that data from the Assessment Authority and multiplying it by the number of rates and sending out the tax notices. The third point is the last one I'll end on. So it's important to note that the 5% tax increase is based on total tax revenues to the municipality. So we have collections also in the when it comes to property tax on school tax, police tax, the levy from the BC Assessment Authority, the levy from the Municipal Finance Authority, the levy from the Okanagan Regional Library, the levy from the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen, and the levy from the Hospital District. So the municipal portion is listed on there, but there's 6 or 7 other different agencies that rely on property tax to determine their bill. And I essentially, they send me a letter saying how much I owe them. I collect it off through the property tax system, and we mail them a check. And that's as far as we go with that. So if you have any other questions on any of these other agencies, the school tax is largely set by the school board. So if you know your school tax is up significantly, contact the school district. Police tax is done through the Ministry of the Interior General. We can get you phone numbers for someone to contact in the province based on police tax. The Assessment Authority, all these organizations, can be spoken to in some way, shape, or form if there's a problem with how much taxes have been collected versus other years. So please do let us know if you have any questions on this. So again, municipal taxation, as we explained before, the estimates are based on more than a 5% increase because of non-market change. We anticipate 11% contributed from the construction department. Looking at the numbers, that might be a little bit overzealous. We may have to adjust that, and it will be adjusted before it goes for third reading in front of council. Again, we don't get the numbers, especially when it comes to the mine, for taxation purposes until January. So we will identify where that comes in January, and we'll move forward. In Princeton, it's primarily driven by new construction. Okay, so BC Assessment is the agency to call if we have a problem with the property assessment, and their phone number is listed there. So the BC Assessment Authority has a number of factors that affect the assessment beyond just the increase in assessment. So if the BC Assessment Authority determines that you are running a business out of part of your property, especially a retail operation, they may value your home at a commercial rate as opposed to a residential rate, class 6 versus class 1, or both. They're fully within the right to do what's called a split class, which is to assess your property at part of it as residential in class 1 and part of it as commercial in class 6. So it's very important that you take a look at your assessment. We can assist with that if necessary. Take a look and we can let you know whether you're being assessed for residential or commercial or any of there are 9 different property classes. There's only 6 that are currently being used within town boundaries, and only 5 that anyone would regularly find on a tax notice, probably more likely 4. But yeah, we can assist in interpreting that and trying to figure out if something like that is worth fighting. Fifth point I'm going to point out, claim the homeowner's grant. So this year, homeowners grants will all be applied for online. The province is taking over administration of that program. Was due to be publicly announced shortly. And you'll go online through their e-tax system and you will apply for your homeowner grant, and the province will tell us when you've applied for it as opposed to us telling the province as in past years. So the tax notice will look a little different this year. It'll be shorter. You will not have to come into town hall to claim the homeowner's grant. So as of now, there is no requirement to come into town hall, period, during tax season. If you wish to pay your tax bill online after you receive it in the mail, then by all means. Yes, so please claim the homeowner's grant. There are several homeowners grants that are claimed late, which incur penalties, and there's no charge for claiming a homeowner grant. We have to include one in the property tax notice, so this year that requirement will probably be removed because, as I said, the province is taking over collection of it. But especially if the mortgage is paid with through a mortgage the property tax paid through a mortgage company, they tend to people tend to forget about applying for that homeowner grant until after the deadline. We tried to modify the tax notices this year to make it a little bit more clear when you need to apply for a homeowner grant, but some people still are not, they get the tax notice, think, oh geez, my bank takes care of all this, and file it away. You need to claim the homeowner grant every year. It is required to claim it. I can't claim it for multiple years. It has to be claimed every year. So please do get in there and claim that homeowner grant. Deferral. So this year we had 7 deferrals within the town of Princeton. The property tax deferral program is done by the provincial government. It's strictly for seniors over the age of 55 and for families with children. And for a small fee to set it up, and ongoing renewals, I believe, are not charged. But the province will pick up the entire cost of the property tax on your house, less the homeowner grant, because if you claim that, that's free. And will charge you a basic amount of interest, but will not require payment of the property tax until you sell your home. There's a couple of eligibility requirements. There's a couple of equity requirements that are required in the home. But if you are having difficulty making the payments on property tax on your home, this is an invaluable program to inquire about, because it does cost money, but again, that's also put into the loan that the province forwards for the property tax. So you pay it when the house gets sold. There's 7 properties that applied for this within the town boundaries, and if you are having difficulty making property tax payments as opposed to incurring penalties and interest and what have you, I strictly urge you to call town hall and ask about the deferral program if you need it. And we'd be happy to explain it and push you in the right direction to get that applied for. Princeton's tax rate remains amongst one of the lowest ones in the province, and one of the lower ones within the South Okanagan region. We plan to keep it that way. That's in our tax policy. But if we need assistance, I really want people to ask questions and seek the assistance they need. Okay, on to revenues. So other sources of funds. So we are provided government grants. Largely government grants tend to be in the form of conditional grants. So it's not money that's just given to us that we can do whatever council sees fit. They are applied to certain projects or certain tasks. The provincial government will give us the money to build a pool. We can't take the money from the pool and build a facade on the visitor center. It has to be offset for the pool. The province does give us an unconditional grant every year called the Small Community Grant. It helps offset some of the higher costs that come with living in a small town. And it is put into general revenue and largely offsets the amount of tax increases that would be required. And if you see the number that's printed on the tax notices every year, that's how much tax revenue would be required to be collected if the small community grant weren't contributed. So that's where that percentage is derived from. Direct operating grants from the regional district, largely cost sharing, so benefits residents in Area H and is used to offset town expenses accordingly, because obviously residents of the town of Princeton should not be paying for services provided to members of Area H. Sales and services, so user fees, Arena, Riverside, Parks, landfill, anything that is a potential service, development, anything that's a potential service can have a user fee applied to it from council. That's where the sales of services come from. And there are other things. There's investments. We have 1/3 ownership in the Vermilion Forest Community Forest Corporation, which provides funding that by policy is placed in that reserve fund for construction of the aquatic center. We get interest off our bank account and from town investments of cash reserves, and potential penalties and interest from unpaid property tax. Yeah, there's several things that go into the other. And then again, in that Schedule B, there is proposed transfers. In Schedule D, they're detailed. Reserves will be transferred into and out of through the year depending on what projects we do and what our operational spending is at the end of the year. Will dictate whether we have money that goes in or out of reserves. It doesn't necessarily detail if we're sinking or swimming. It's just sort of a fact of life. Operational expenses are usually covered with the most secure forms of funding. So that's usually where you get your municipal taxation and your cost sharing grants from municipal tax or from regional district taxation. When it comes to capital spending, that's where we get sometimes our if it's not properly funded, the project doesn't go through, but the capital revenue also doesn't get through. So the budget tends to drop on both sides accordingly. The financial plan is proposed transfers of reserve funds as necessary. We pass resolutions to authorize council to take money out of reserves. Staff proposes that and council authorizes. Any actual expenses are done with a resolution. This year was done in November, and usually by then we have a pretty good handle on all the reserve transfers that are necessary, and it's just a little easier administratively to do it in one fell swoop as opposed to do it every single solitary time. Schedule E is a permissive tax exemption policy, and again we have explained what the permissive tax exemptions are. And the amounts of those are published in our annual report. So our annual report is due by June 30th. It gives some wonderful statistics and updates on how our strategic planning went and where our main focus is as staff and the council has approved for us. It's an excellent document. It is on our website now. The 2019 version. The 2020 version is due by 2021. And again, if there are any questions, that's also done by open meeting. So submissions will be solicited and can be submitted for the annual report. Again, thank you for your attention to this presentation. I wish we were meeting in person so we could do something a little bit more interactive, answer questions on the spot. You know, I wish everyone a very happy holiday, a very Merry Christmas, and I sincerely hope that in 2021, at the end of the year, we're making a budget with a little bit more of a traditional public consultation process, and we can meet together to get questions answered on the spot, as opposed to having to use the phone and the email. So that's all I have. If there are any further questions, once again, email to finance@princeton.ca, by drop off to Town Hall, and if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call, and I'll be happy to answer what I can. So thank you very much, and we'll update as we need to.